Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session with me, Natasha Ewing Johnson, your real estate strategist. And today I have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce to you Steve Glick. He is one of my lending partners, and he and I have done some great things in the foreign national space. So today we're going to be talking specifically about the foreign national program. So I want to give Steve a chance to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, and then we're going to jump right into the foreign national program, what it is, and for those of you looking from other countries that want to invest in real estate here in the US. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the folks a little bit about who you are.
Great. Thanks, Natasha. So as Natasha mentioned, my name is Steve Glick. I'm the Sales and Operations Director here at Home Abroad Loans. We focus on assisting foreign national and non-US residents purchase property in the United States. I've been in the mortgage industry for going on 15 years now, and have seen all the highs and lows, and really love just being able to help clients, especially clients who don't realize all the opportunities here in the US to buy property. I really love the opportunity to help them and kind of show them how investing and how property ownership is so achievable here in the US.
That's awesome. So, Steve, let's talk about that segues really well into, can you briefly explain what the Foreign National Program is and who is it designed for?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we actually have is a specific set of products that are geared towards foreign national buyers. So these are people without U.S. residency, U.S. credit, or any sort of citizenship here in America. Unlike a lot of countries, what's great is that it is a truly free market in the United States in terms of buying U.S. real estate. So you can be from almost any country in the world. You can, with minimal down payment requirements, with minimal impact to interest rates, and then no additional taxes or stamp duty, you can buy property in the United States for investment, for vacation homes, things like that, which really allows you to expand your portfolio and avoid some of the restrictions that maybe currently are in place in other countries where people tend to invest.
Awesome. So, what are some of the biggest myths or misunderstandings that foreign buyers have when trying to finance property here in the US? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest myth is that people think it's not possible. That's probably the biggest thing, right? It's educating. A lot of our clients really are coming to us. They find something online or they find something through their searching on social media, and all of a sudden they realize that something that they thought was impossible or not available to them in terms of U.S. investment and getting a loan here in the U.S. to buy property was not something that was achievable for them. So that's the biggest thing. The other big myths that I love to debunk are significant down payment requirements. The minimum down payment for a foreign national investor in the US is only 25%. So it's not really anything that's unachievable.
Yeah, I heard this week, one of the clients I was talking to was like, yeah, someone told him he needed 40% down to purchase a property. And that's another myth that is out there, right? That you need significant. I'm glad you're bringing that up because that's important to know.
Absolutely, because what a lot of clients do is they'll go to their bank and they'll try to say, because even banks that offer mortgages to foreign buyers have much more restrictive requirements than some of the other private lenders that we work with here at Home Abroad. So that 35-40% requirement, right, very common, as well as having to have a deposit balance with that bank. There's no deposit requirement when you're getting a loan through us. And then in addition, the interest rate isn't really that far off from what U.S. citizens will pay. I would say that on average, foreign nationals can expect to see only about a 0.5% difference in the interest rate based on what U.S. citizens would pay for the same deal. And because loans are amortized over a 30-year period, it keeps those monthly mortgage payments very low, which makes immediate cash flow very achievable.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's a crucially important thing. So what kind of documentation is typically required for a foreign national to qualify for financing? Because a lot of times, I mean, when they're hearing it from friends or relatives here, I found that foreign nationals is a lot simpler and it requires less documentation a lot of the time. So talk to us a little bit about what documentation is required.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In a lot of instances, being a foreign national actually makes the requirements less stringent than a US citizen, which sounds crazy, but it's
I
actually true.
know.
So, what a lot of clients, if they do their research and they look online, they'll learn a lot about what's called a DSCR loan. So it stands for debt service coverage ratio. But essentially, what that means is that what we will do as a lender is we will actually review the property's income potential as opposed to individuals' income. So you won't need to verify any of your income from either the US or your home country to qualify for a loan. What we'll do is we'll analyze and we'll determine the rental income potential on that property. And just as long as that rental income is sufficient enough to cover the monthly housing expense, and sometimes even if it isn't, we can qualify you for a loan. In addition, there's no credit check, there's no credit reference. You're not going to need reference letters and things like that from your home country in order to qualify. So credit is not a problem at all. And that's where it actually can become easier for a foreign national than for a US citizen. US citizens will have to provide, we'll have to run credit, get a credit report, and verify your credit score.
That is some awesome information. So, do they need an I-10? Because I've had people confuse the foreign national program with an I-10 program. What's I-10? The individual tax identification number. So, let's talk a little bit about that because we want to ensure that we're clarifying this is not an I-10 program, it's a true foreign national program.
That's exactly right. So I-10 can kind of come into play in two ways. A lot of times when people create an entity or a US-based LLC or something like that, they may at some point get an I-10. That will start actually as an EIN number when they're establishing their business. That is not related to the loan at all. I-10 loan programs are actually completely different. An I-10 loan is really meant for people who have immigrated to the US, maybe do not have legal status in the US, but are paying taxes and therefore receive that tax identification number that we're talking about. That is a separate loan product that we also do offer. So for clients who maybe fit that bucket, we do offer a product for those individuals as well. But for the true foreign national, there's no requirement of an I-10 or a tax ID number in order to qualify for a loan.
That's awesome. That is really important. Now, are there restrictions on the type of properties that foreign nationals can finance? For example, primary residence, short-term rental. Are there any kind of restrictions in terms of the program?
So for primary residence, you just need to have some level of residency in the United States. So whether that be a non-permanent resident visa, a green card, or citizenship, that would be required for a primary residence. For second homes or investment properties, again, typically just having any sort of ability to come to the US, and in some cases even without, we can qualify you for a loan. So there's no residency requirement or anything like that. In terms of the types of properties and the types of products that you can get, anything from a single family home to a condo to a townhouse. Multi-family property is very popular for a lot of investors, so duplexes, triplexes, etc. And then even higher unit count property is something that we offer as well. So your 5 to 8 apartment complexes and things like that for some of our higher net worth investors. And then even in some cases, commercial property is possible. So people looking for warehouses, storefronts, and things like that. We've also done products for people looking for rehab loans, so renovations. So foreign nationals they look for a lower entry point. So buying a property that needs some renovation or some rehab, we can offer financing for that as well. I would say probably the only time when we run into a real restriction is when you're looking for an unexperienced ground up construction. So buying a plot of land, building something from scratch, that sometimes can be challenging. But other than that, we do almost everything.
So are there any additional fees or taxes that buyers should be aware of? I know I do explain to my buyers about FERPTA, But is there anything else that they should be aware of in terms of potential fees or that they, from a lending perspective?
Yeah, not up front. So, especially when during the actual purchase of a property, there are no additional taxes or fees that you will pay as a non-US citizen or a non-US resident. So, foreign nationals will have the same exact, implications in terms of closing fees and taxes and things like that a US citizen will. So, what we usually recommend to our clients is usually assume about 3 to 4% of the loan amount you should set aside for closing costs. And that includes everything from origination and underwriting fees to government fees to title and escrow services. So yeah, there's no additional taxes or fees on the front end. On the back end, you mentioned FERPTA. That is really just a holdback as opposed to an additional fee, and that's what's really important for clients to understand as well. And it's just to make sure that any capital gains, so tax that you would pay on the sale of a property, is collected during tax time. So it's not an additional fee, it's just more of a security mechanism that the government implements to ensure that those taxes are paid.
So what about potential roadblocks? What have you seen as a potential roadblock? For example, do they need to have money in a US based checking account? I mean, what are some of how do they prepare for the entire process?
So there's a couple things that you can do as a foreign buyer if you are looking to purchase property in the US that you can start ahead of time to get yourself ready. The first is determine whether or not you want to set up a US-based entity to hold the property. So a lot of our investors do choose to open a US LLC, which is a very easy process. It gives you both tax and legal protections that owning the property as an individual may not offer. So it's not an expensive process, and it's actually very simple. We have a concierge service here at Home Abroad that can do it for our clients as well. It usually takes about 7 to 10 days, and it's one form and it's done. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is setting up a US bank account. So once you have your LLC set up, or if you choose to hold property as an individual, you will need to open a US bank account in order to transfer funds and set up your automatic mortgage payment. We have a number of fintechs that do it online. We also have bank referrals for certain banks that will even offer to open an account for you without ever having to step foot on US soil. So there's plenty of options there in order to get those account openings set up. And then the last thing is just get educated, right? It's never too early to start a conversation with somebody like myself or somebody like you, Natasha, just to learn what's available. I've had clients who come to me who aren't ready to buy for a year or more. That's great. I love being able to give that information, help you understand the process. You can start kind of understanding the locations and the type of property and really what the return on your investment will look like, both in the short and the long term.
Awesome. So why is foreign nationals financing? Because some of them I've seen like, well, do I pay cash or do I finance? Why is financing a better option? From my perspective it is, but let's talk to you because I know as a lender, you've seen it all. And while you may have a lot of cash solvency, is it recommended that you finance versus paying cash for a property when you're purchasing your first, for example, investment property here?
Yeah, so the benefits of taking out a mortgage to buy property, the biggest and most obvious reason is leverage. Just having the ability to get more for your money. So, if you're buying in cash, you're limited to what you have in assets in terms of your purchase price. You have the ability to buy more and possibly make more money in the long term by buying a property with a loan, so with a mortgage. So that's probably the biggest thing. Then there's other benefits as well, right? So the ability to refinance, to take cash equity out of your property, to then go and further your portfolio. Because most of our investors aren't looking just to buy one property, they're looking to own multiple doors and really expand into a full business here in the US. The other reason is, there's things like tax benefits. So you can write off your mortgage interest as part of your income tax returns. I always recommend talking to a tax professional about that. But, it's definitely something that a lot of our investors do see the benefit in terms when it comes to tax time and paying their income taxes here in the United States. So those are really the big advantages to getting a mortgage as opposed to paying cash. It's not a hard process, 30 days, right, from the time that you sign a purchase contract to closing. as we already talked about, the documentation requirements are pretty reasonable, and those payments stay relatively low. So you're still making sure that you're, getting cash positive flow from the rental property that you own.
So how can they reach out to you to learn more about the Foreign National Program?
Well, I appreciate, thanks for asking. So definitely feel free to visit homeabroadinc.com. We've got a lot of information, a lot of what I've talked about today, as well as tons of articles online. You can also fill out an inquiry form there and have one of our experienced loan officers reach out to you for an initial consultation. Feel free to, email me, stephen.glick@homeabroadloans.com. Always available. Happy to answer any questions as well. And then we actually just launched a really exciting platform called Ziffy AI. So Ziffy, Ziffy.ai. We've actually built a property search platform which collects properties off of the MLS, or the listings platform here in the United States, and will actually have built-in investment analysis for our clients. So they can find any property that's for sale. They can run an investment analysis, see what the cash flow and the ROI looks like on those properties, and then reach out to us if they want to explore it a little bit further.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. So what kind of final advice or encouragement you'd like to give an international buyers that are on the fence about whether to purchase now or to wait, or what advice would you give them?
I think the biggest thing is just to educate yourself. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, right? And there's a lot of, and as we've already talked about, there's a lot of things, a lot of misconceptions and myths within the real estate business. Talking to a professional, talking to experts like yourself is really, really crucial. Real estate agents here in the US are going to be your best friend, especially when you're a foreign national, because understanding the local market is so crucial. Understanding what the rental market looks like, what the rate of appreciation is going to be on your property. Are you buying in a neighborhood that's going to give you both short-term and long-term investment return is so important. And I think the other thing is just not to be deterred by interest rates. A lot of people are very interest rate driven in the US and all over the world. When you're talking about loans that are 30 years long, the interest rate shouldn't really be your main focus. Your return on your investment should be your main focus. Things like refinance, things like being able to pay off loans early is all kind of helps to make sure that you're putting yourself in a strong financial situation.
Repaying the loan, etc. Yeah.
Right. So just making sure that you're not sitting there and wondering, okay, I'm going to wait 6 months for rates to go down, when that may not happen. Or maybe they'll go up, or maybe the rates will go down, and then all of a sudden the market's going to be flooded with buyers, and the property prices are going to go up. So there's a lot of different ways that you could look at this and make sure that you're making a right decision. Again, just talk to an expert, make sure you're getting all the information, and don't be afraid to have those conversations.
Yeah. And just to that point, because while the double digit growth is not there in terms of appreciation like it was a few years ago, we are still seeing, for example, here in the Metro Atlanta area, home prices continue to tick up slightly, while interest rates have pretty much stabilized. They're right around the 6 to 7%, or 8% in some cases. So you do want to take advantage now, and you can always reassess if rates do drop lower than what you originally purchased at, and refi the house 6 months out, just to get a better rate, take advantage of a lower rate. So there are always opportunities for you to do amazing things. And so I want you to, as a buyer, be aware that having the right education and the right team that's supporting your purchase is going to be crucial. One final word of advice. Now, you mentioned something earlier and I didn't really tag on to it, but it was like, do you physically have to be here in the US to close the loan?
No. So the short answer is no. So there's a lot of different options in terms of signing. So yes, you can sign at a US embassy, although that can be very difficult with finding appointments. What's great is that there are a lot of countries that are part of what's called the Hague Convention, so they can actually sign with what's called an apostille notary. And then even easier than that is remote online notaries. So that has become a very popular way for signing. A lot of lenders are starting to get on board with that technology. And essentially all you're doing is you're joining a Zoom call, just like you and I are on right now. meeting with a U.S. notary, verifying your identity, and signing your documents that way. It's very common now. It's very easy to do, and it's also much more cost effective than some of the other options we've discussed. So no, you don't have to be physically in the U.S. in order to sign, and we're happy to accommodate all of those needs.
Awesome. Well, definitely, I thank you again, Steve, for providing all of your insight today. If you're looking for more information regarding buying here an investment property here in the U.S., I will include my contact information as well as Steve's contact information below this video. And keep watching for additional value-added information regarding being a foreign investor here in the United States. Thanks for joining, and have an amazing day.